Hello everyone, welcome to our Facebook Live. I'm Christelle Chapouri, Senior Communication Officer for Latin America and the Caribbean at the World Bank. Every day, thousands of Venezuelans are fleeing severe social and economic conditions. An estimated 3.7 million Venezuelan migrants have left the country since the beginning of this humanitarian crisis. This is the second displacement crisis in the world after Syria. Many migrants are now living in neighboring countries across the region. Colombia is the largest recipient with 1.2 million, followed by Peru, Chile, Ecuador, and many other countries. I'm joined here today by Eduardo Stein, the UN Special Representative for Venezuelan migrants and refugees in the country, in the region. Welcome.
Thanks for the invitation.
So just to start the conversation, what is the state of migration in the region? What is the state of the Venezuelan migration?
Well, first of all, it is the largest, more complex, and more demanding phenomenon in the history of Latin America ever. Secondly, the flow has continued at a rate of about 5,000 persons daily. If the flow continues at this rate without any major upsurges, we will get to the end of 2019 above the 5 million mark. Thirdly, we intentionally are not counting in those Venezuelans crossing through illegal crossings, which are hundreds of them in a very large frontier with 3 or 4 countries. But if we were to factor in an educated guess of those crossing there, we would certainly have already arrived at a 4 million mark. Fourthly, the Latin American governments of the receiving countries have exhibited, together with their populations, an extremely generous and solidary attitude, opening up their hearts and their institutional capacity and, of course, their budgets to receiving these quantities, but they are already exhausted and superseded. There is a dire need of international support to complement what the local governments are doing. And lastly, most of those crossing in the last 1.5 years to 2 years are crossing without documents, which they cannot obtain within Venezuela. And so the identity element is crucial in order to guarantee their access to rights and services. The irregularity and the invisibility without an identity document, a passport or etc., increases the vulnerability and subject that population to abuses by organized crime outfits along the border.
So what does that mean for the region and for the countries that are hosting those migrants?
Well, there are 2 moments. First, the initial needs that are of an emergency kind, health, food, shelter, etc. And then a second phase, which is that of social and economic integration. So Venezuelan population ceases to be, as quickly as possible, just a load to the local budgets and become economically productive. That jump or that transit into productivity includes a cultural process that is normally happening at very high speed, and that is not an easy task. So that Venezuelan boys, girls, people of different kinds can immediately begin to be productive in the communities that they try to integrate in. So the important thing is to invest also in the receiving communities. But local governmental budgets are exhausted, institutional capacities are superseded, mostly in education and health, And that's why we are in dire need of international support that is needed very, very soon.
From your experience, what can be done to help migrants, but also the communities and the countries that are helping them, that are hosting them?
Well, we've seen, along with the generosity of the receiving communities and countries, a lot of volunteer organizations abroad that have sent people to the different places, civil society organizations that together with the UN agencies and the receiving governments are working together, mostly church organizations with also very inventive resources and generosity, but they are also in dire need of help, outside help. And technical capacities are also at some point needed to complement local health services, for example, local integration mechanisms as well. So the appeal is constant and immediate.
Thank you, Eduardo. You will be participating this afternoon in an event called Beyond Borders, a look at the Venezuelan exodus. And I would like to invite the audience to join the live stream online. But before we end this Facebook Live, do you have any final words for our listeners?
Well, let me say that Latin America as a whole will never be the same again after this monumental crisis, and hopefully it will serve for us to better integrate amongst ourselves and be creative for the future.
Thanks again. Thanks again for listening. Please follow our conversation with the hashtag Venezuelan Exodus, and thanks, and I hope you can join our live stream later this afternoon for the event Beyond Borders, a look at the Venezuelan exodus. Thank you.